Greetings and welcome to another episode of Going All In, Get the Edge You Need to Succeed. I'm Dr. Erin McKinley, and today I have for you part 2 of Directors' Deal Breakers. My favorite question to ask directors when they come on the program: what is one or more things that a student may do that might raise some red flags or be a total deal breaker for a director's decision in ranking them for their program? I have 25 clips from programs that were previously on the podcast this past year, and they all provide really awesome information that is very much applicable to all students who would be watching this, needing some tips for their upcoming dietetic internship applications. Check it out.
I know that the application process is very circuitous, but we've also put a lot of time and effort into having a lot of information available on our website. And so when I get communications from intern applicants asking questions that I know are answered on the webpage, or asking very basic general types of questions, I know that they have not done their homework. So a lack of preparation, depending on us to do the work for them, to me is a pet peeve.
Yes, and then also just playing into that attention to detail. We work hard to provide a lot of information on our website, and just seeing something that maybe they submitted something but they addressed their personal statement to another program, or little things like that would kind of stand out, like, oh, well, you must not be that serious about our program. Poor communication is another one. So we've talked about this a lot, how we really, really value communication. And if there's issues where someone's in the process of applying and there's difficulty with the communication, that usually raises a red flag for us, because we know, in being a distance program, how important communication is throughout the entire process. So that's a big one for us as well.
Okay, so yeah, obviously there's, red flags that I think we're all pretty aware of, but fortunately I find that students really do try to put their best foot forward. And one of our preceptors actually tells our interns that their time with her is like an 8-week job interview. And I really do think that's good advice. We know that in those 8 weeks, you're gonna mess up, and that's okay, because none of us are perfect. But I don't think we have something, that would guarantee that a student wouldn't be considered, aside from those red flags that we all are really thinking of. What I can say, though, is we do want to see that a student wants to come to our program. So if they just aren't that into us, that would probably be cause for concern for us. If we get a feel that they're not really into what Bradley is and what our program is, that certainly would be a red flag for us.
That's a tough one. I haven't had to eliminate anybody based on any interviews. Although at a different university, I got a recommendation letter from someone who basically said, do not take this student, they're a nightmare. So, that kind of information would possibly come in through a reference. So my advice is, when you're asking for references, ask if the person can write a strong reference, not just can they write a reference. If a student asks me, can you write a reference, I'm inclined to say yes. But if they say, can you write a strong reference, I say, give me all your stuff and let me look it over, and I'll let you know, because I don't keep that in my head. So that's been where the red flags have come for me. Transcripts, we all have common sense. If somebody got off to a really bad start and then they changed majors and that's why their GPA is low, we can see that and understand it. So we're not letter of the law on that. But if I look at someone's transcripts and their science grades are all C's and they think they're going to come to Auburn and take these intense nutrition science courses, we have to have a conversation about that. Like, what happened? And do you really want to do this? Because we want you to be happy. We want you to be in a good fit. So I guess that would be, I won't even call it a deal breaker, but well, of course, if it's lower than a C, you have to take it over. That is a deal breaker. But if you're on the margin there, maybe you have all A's in, your fine arts and your humanities, but in the sciences you had a real struggle, then you probably don't want to have to, put yourself through that. You might want to find a clinical nutrition master's.
Not a total deal breaker, but it definitely makes me hesitant is an incomplete application. Because I think, if they haven't spent the time to put together their application, how are they going to do in an internship? Are they going to be able to complete everything that needs to be done? So that's definitely one thing that really sticks out in my brain.
If there is some demonstration of a lack of maturity, that is a big red flag amongst the the committee as a whole. I think that's why work experience is weighted as heavily as it is, because I have learned that the greater work experience that someone has, the more mature that person tends to be. That's not a blanket statement. That doesn't mean if you don't have a lot of work experience, you shouldn't apply. But I think maturity is an issue that we've run into in the past, and so. If you don't have a lot of work experience, I think you certainly want to be able to communicate a level of, professionalism and maturity within your personal statement. And I think you do that by doing your research, connecting with me, right? Send me an email and let's have a conversation and, include that in your personal statement. I want to, that you've, So I think there are ways around it, but if you don't have a whole lot of work experience, but that's certainly a deal breaker if there is some degree of immaturity. I think that's probably the biggest thing that we talk about as a committee.
Number one biggest red flag is not having any work or volunteer experience. And if an applicant has been focused so heavily on school that they don't have real work or volunteer, we're kind of looking at, we want work and volunteer, honestly. But if there's not much of anything, that's going to be a deal breaker. So we really need our applicants to have had at least a job, at least a volunteer opportunity, because we want to see people that are good at doing lots of different things. So not just focusing on school, but also having a part-time job, or also volunteering, or both, or participating in a sport, something like that.
But see, the biggest thing is, blanks on your application. I can't tell you how many times students might assume that we're just going to look at the resume and not look at the actual application. And so they leave some portions of the application blank. And so you want to make sure that you fill in every single part of your application. It might feel redundant, but for us, your resume might be the last thing that we see when we actually review your application in DICAP. So make sure that you're going through and you're filling in everything. And that's very much like if you've applied to a job before, you not only do you have to submit your resume, but you have to fill in all of those experiences. It's the same thing with your DICAS application. And again, that's attention to detail. That's showing that you care, that you're taking initiative. And so I would say for me, not filling out things. And then also, unfortunately, we've seen students, put the wrong program in their personal statement, because you are applying to multiple programs.
Oh, no.
So, personalize it as much as possible. Why specifically do you want to be a dietetic intern at Meredith College? Why is it a good match? And how are you going to stand out is really really important. And so those are kind of my big things of that might be a hard stop.
Yes. Yeah,
and I do try and give the students the benefit of the doubt too. So if we have a student that has a really great application and some areas are blank, we might actually reach out to that student and say, gosh, what happened here, or can you explain that a little bit more? So
certainly it's possible to make a spelling error, but Carly, how many people looked at your application before you hit submit or complete?
Oh gosh, so many. I think I sent it to like everyone I knew, all my professors, please look at this.
Yes. So hopefully you'll be able to weed out some of those spelling errors there, but I like to see every area of the application, complete, no blanks. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then just one more, I know that kind of running tight on time, but one more I would say is, if you are doing an in-person interview, sometimes here at Meredith College, we don't do in-person interviews, but we do like to meet our students either via open house or virtual appointments. But make sure, students who don't have any affect, you have no idea, they have no facial expressions, they're not giving you any idea of if they're understanding what you're saying, or they're not showing any passion or excitement. Obviously we don't want, fake excitement, right. But, I would say authentic students, showing authentic passion and authentic and I would say like intentional interest in your program is really desirable, and having no affect is something that would be kind of a turnoff for us for a potential applicant.
And that's because our preceptors have told us, they're like, we want feedback from the student. We want the student to smile gently or, sort of frown if they're a little confused about something, but they want to be able to have feedback. And that sometimes comes with facial expression. So that's been something that our preceptors have told us for many, many years that they like to see.
I don't want to say irritates, but it becomes frustrating. If everything is on the website of what you should be including and it's not included, that's definitely a huge red flag for me. Or if you ask a question and the answer is on our website, that's another red flag. It shows that you lack attention to detail and that you didn't take the time to do what you needed to do to prepare yourself. So that's something that's, I would say, is a red flag for me right away. And in the DICUS applications, just as an example, if you do not have the requirements that we ask of, it's an automatic, we don't even look at your application.
For me, the most telling is the interview that we do. To me, that's really important because we have a very cooperative family kind of program. We want to see that you're going to fit in here, that you're going to be supportive. If we hear really offensive statements, it's just kind of a deal breaker. And unfortunately, they do happen. And I'd also say that as far as the interview is that, we're looking for people who can speak with preceptors when they're going to go out in sites. Some of our clinical sites do require some interviews, so we're looking for those skills. And beyond that, it's just, a complete application. I don't know, through our graduate school, it may be a little easier than the DICUS system when we look at Dietetic Internship Program applicants and they don't fill out sections. I mean, it's just, we can't, give them any points for that. We don't see it. I don't want to have to hunt down to find your volunteer experience. So if, you don't put it on your application, we just don't know it's there. That's kind of probably, I know sometimes students have done things that they're not showing me. And that's always frustrating, from my point of view, because I know that there's so much more to them than what they're putting on this piece of paper.
I would say one of the most important things is the ability to be flexible and to adapt and to be positive and optimistic no matter what is going on in the stressful environment. There's no question about it that these years can be very stressful with the new experiences and working and learning outside of your comfort zone. So I like to see that students have that positive, go get them, I'm going to give you 110% attitude, and So therefore, if I see the opposite of that, where I see efforts where, or situations where people act like they really didn't care or they didn't try very hard, those would be things that would be negatives.
For us, I guess I'm going to term it as red flags. So something that might be a red flag is unprofessionalism, or if it appears for some reason that you don't get along well with others, which I guess that kind of goes under unprofessionalism. And that's a pretty broad category. So I left it kind of broad. So your imagination could run wild with what is unprofessional. So obviously we have seen some things that are unprofessional, but unprofessional sometimes is language. Unprofessional sometimes is dress. Unprofessional sometimes is your Facebook profile. Unprofessional sometimes can be what somebody else has said about you. I mean, it's a pretty broad category. So that would be a red flag to us. And then for us, another red flag is going to be somebody who has a lot of D's on their transcript. So if we have a lot of D's, F's, W's, things of that nature, it's going to be a red flag. It's not a no, it's a red flag. And most of the time people will address that in their personal statement. So if they've had a semester that didn't look as great, they were going to address that in their personal statement. Applications are normally seen as a holistic whenever they come to us. So it's not like if you have a bad grade, like you go in this pile, and if you have a good grade, you go in this pile. That's not how it necessarily works. Really look at the whole applicant. So I'm just kind of telling you, don't make that a red flag, because I'm giving you that loophole there as write about it. Tell us about it. If you're on the phone with me talking about it, tell me about those grades. Tell me what happened. Yeah.
To use a family or personal friend or even clergy as a reference. We feel it's important that the references should be professional and not family or close friends. And preferably the reference needs to know you really well so they can speak to your characteristics. I guess I could say another thing too is on the personal statement, just make sure it's grammatically correct. Please. It's very important.
That if you give me a personal statement that says, I'm so interested in going to Saskatoon University, I'm so happy, then yeah, that's going to be a red flag because you haven't paid attention to the details. The other thing that I think we have talked about regularly as a selection committee is when we see the expression of a clearly unscientific view of nutrition. So we all know as RDNs that there's a ton of information out there, and it's our job as professionals and as scientists to discern what is evidence-based and what is not. So if I see evidence that you're not doing that well based on a particular position that you become very associated with, then that gives me a flag, because we're really committed in our graduate program to help you discern scientifically what is evidence-based and what is not, what you want to translate for the lay public and what you want to warn them of. That's one of our jobs as RDNs.
For me, one of my real pet peeves is getting a personal statement that's tailored to a different program. I've seen this a few times, more than a few times maybe, where it's pretty clearly written to another program. They're talking about, some kind of a master's in clinical nutrition or something that's clearly not us, or they might even name that program. Say, here's why I'm interested to join, XYZ university, and it's not us. So in that case, I stop reviewing. I'm not going to review their application because they're not really that interested.
All right. Any other pet peeves?
That's probably the biggest one. When we review applications, we really review the whole application. Even if, the GPA doesn't quite meet our standard, I still review the entire application because that person might have other attributes. Their letters of recommendation might be fantastic and they might be a great fit after all. So I would say I'm pretty open to looking at most applications. But that's the one thing that kind of gets to me.
I think in traditional programs, you would probably raise a red flag with grades, maybe, right? If you see someone that maybe got a C in biochemistry or a C in physiology. I think the advantage of coming into a program like this is that you're going to have a little more coursework, a lot more coursework really compared to an internship. So that's going to help prepare you more. So it's different from a normal and traditional internship in that way. I think if somebody was very closed-minded or it looked like they were very unflexible, because I think in this profession, you really need to be flexible and you have to be open-minded. So those would be two qualities maybe that would raise red flags. But if you are showing that flexibility, organization, that's usually one that goes along with dietetics as well. But again, this isn't going to be these type of programs. The FGs are probably not as competitive as the traditional internship. So just putting your best foot forward, I think, is most important.
Saw a lack of integrity or a lack of respect, because I think this being a pre-professional program, that one, people have to behave all the time, right? They're out there to take advantage of an internship to build relationships and build bridges that will help them for their entire career. And if I saw that they weren't respectful or, had that concern of, when you're out there, you're representing me and the program at Syracuse University. And if I can't trust that person because I'm worried they're going to be disrespectful, I think that would be a deal breaker.
In my experience as an internship director at a different university, the one thing that really was kind of a red flag for me is if you send me an email while you're going through the application process and I don't respond to it immediately, and you send me another email the next day, right? So you just... That's always been somewhat of a red flag to me. Or if you send me some kind of communication and I send something back and I don't hear from you, right? Or if I try to set up a meeting with you and you don't respond, that is a red flag for me.
And I think we had a student just ask us that the other day too, Mark. And I think one of my responses was grammatic and obvious errors and typos on that one-page personal statement that the students write, not proofreading that appropriately can be a red flag. And or in reference to what Mark said, I don't know that we've had too many mention a different program. I'd say maybe one in a lot of years, but use typos on that. And in terms of the interview, I mean, I can tell you what we want to see: a positive attitude, enthusiasm, and some passion for the field. So I guess somebody who doesn't express that might raise a red flag for me. The need to be flexible. Our students will tell you that. Certainly with being hit with COVID, we all had to be, and these guys did an excellent job. And getting along well with people, that's certainly essential. So any flags against that would be a sign.
I think if they don't follow directions, say the application asks for professors or advisors and they don't provide that, or say they cannot provide that, they need to at least contact us and give an explanation why. Also, if they've maybe asked for a recommendation from someone and the recommendation is not that good, maybe it shouldn't have been one that was submitted in the first place. So I feel like whoever you're asking for references, they really should know you pretty well and be giving you a good reference. In the personal statement, I also think some red flags are, I think you want to really be careful with what you're writing about and telling the potential faculty. You want it to be pertinent to you.
I don't think I have one. I don't know. We don't have one. Sometimes you can tell someone's a little more argumentative about a topic. So we did have one person that we kind of thought instead of just, we like to have a good debate, but we felt that they were more inflammatory and not really going to, just be someone who would really absorb the learning experience and be more opinionated. So that was one time that was a red flag, but that's unusual that happens.
And I'd say pick your references carefully, because there are a few red flags that come up sometimes in a referee's letter. So make sure you have an idea of your relationship with the person that you're asking to write your letter, and that you're confident that they understand the rigors of getting into an internship program. Because sometimes I think they just write something very short because they don't realize how important it is. So just make sure you pick those people very carefully.
And the work recommendations tend to be, I think, harder than the academic ones. So they should keep that in mind when they're picking. Like, we want to see one from a boss, but a boss won't probably pick up as many accolades as an academic recommendation will.
Because again, they don't realize how competitive it is.
So we try to take that into consideration, but
they tend to write very short ones. But Lorraine and I each year have an underdog, so that we bring to the admissions committee. So I don't really have very many red flags.
Well, believe it or not, we have gotten personal statements where they mentioned the wrong internship. That was a red flag of no attention to detail. So watch that. And, make sure you're getting strong letters of recommendation. I think that's probably the most common red flag that I see is if someone doesn't give you the most stellar recommendation, that can be a red flag.
So that's really where the recommendation letters come in. We take those very seriously. I think that students need to be very careful in who they ask, very strategic in who they ask to write their recommendation letters. And I recommend that when a student first think about, what do I want this person to share about me? What kind of picture do I want them to paint? And then after you decide who you're going to ask and you ask them and they accept, then you let them know, this is what I'm really hoping that you can speak to. This is why I selected you as a reference. And not that they have to talk about that, but it's a great way to kind of guide them, because Dr. McKinley, you probably, as someone who writes a lot of recommendation letters, it helps to have a little guidance. And what are you looking for us to say? We know you, but we don't want to have write the same letter for you as we are for your fellow student classmate. So don't be afraid to just share kind of what you're hoping that people will, your reference will speak to in that recommendation letter. But those can be very insightful, not only what the person says, but who the applicant chooses to have write their recommendation letter. So choosing a friend that you've worked with probably isn't the best choice of a reference. You want it to be a really credible reference that doesn't have anything, kind of doesn't have another dog in the fight, isn't also your best friend that wants to see you get in this program, but really can speak honestly to your skills and your performance. So definitely the recommendation letters are going to be a big kind of key to looking for those red flags. Yeah.
I will tell you that as much as I try to not judge, when someone emails me and says, I found your program and I'm really interested in it, please tell me more about it. I have a website and we spent a long time making it look nice and have lots of info on it. And it's really not that hard to find it. And so I find that if you didn't take the effort to at least hit the highlights on the website, I'm not that interested in having you be one of my interns, because it seems like you could have put a little more effort in up front.
I think one of the things that, again, is be interested in public health or community health. I think that sometimes applicants are just trying to fill out their applications and get into the deadline of DICAS and just want to get an internship. And I think that you really need to be thoughtful on what you're going for. Again, as Professor Randall mentioned, is that if your goal is to be clinical nutrition support or an administrator, this is probably not the program for you. You'll develop skills that could eventually lead to that. But our emphasis is on public health and community. And sometimes we've have candidates that even when we're talking to them, even with some pulling and coaching to get them to talk about community or public health, they'll just stay with, I really want to work in renal. I really want to be a sports dietitian. And you're probably not going to be a good fit for us.
If I see inconsistencies in the application, or if, there's some level of dishonesty that was evident, that would be a real red flag for me. It's happened before where we've had people apply and then, maybe, I'm trying to think, it hasn't happened very often, but where something was found to be untruthful. And, in our small world of dietetics, we all know each other. And I think it's important to be honest and truthful. And, that would probably be the only thing I can think of, really. That would be a red flag for me.
I think there's been a couple of instances where I can tell that a candidate is applying to the program just to apply, and they may not, I'm getting the sense that they're just kind of going through the motions, and we may not really be where they want to be. I've had applicants tell me that we're their second choice, and so that doesn't make us feel great. So you make that face that
I cringe. That's something my students would never do.
I've seen and heard a lot. But I think that if you're going to be applying to the program, you obviously at least sell yourself as you're interested in the program, right? I've also seen red flags come up in letters of reference. The person writing the letter of reference, either they're just blatantly honest and it creates red flags about certain behaviors, whether it be professionalism or overall work ethic can raise red flags. So that's why I always advise, make sure you sought out good individuals to write your letters of reference for you.
Sometimes the first red flag is an incomplete DICAS application. So if there's things that are left out, for example, for a distance program, we really need to have uploaded the supplemental materials. So we require at least, I believe, a community and a clinical preceptor that's secured. If those aren't uploaded and that the directions aren't followed, that's a red flag. Also, if an applicant isn't prepared. So we usually do online interviews for those eligible candidates. And I'm usually one that's very organized, and I send out a Zoom link and a time and a date and everything like that. So if an applicant has either not responded or maybe is late or isn't prepared to answer the questions, that would be a red flag for me.
Probably goes without saying, and your students are smart. They know that they need to proofread. And I think, that's going to apply to their resume. That's going to apply to all aspects of their application. That's going to apply to any email correspondence as well. I think that's certainly important. I think one thing that I notice is when a candidate does ask questions, and I like to put a lot of thought into responding to their questions, and to really, answer as comprehensively as I can. I do notice if they don't respond to my response, if that makes any sense. I think that it has me wondering, when a preceptor is giving of their time, if they become an intern of ours and a preceptor is giving of their time, which they do, you want to know that intern is going to be appreciative and recognize the commitment that the preceptor has given to them as a student. So it's a very simple thing, I think, to do, but that's definitely something that I've noticed in the past.
Yeah, I think the other thing I would add to that would be when I have contacts, if an individual asks a question that's readily available on the website, that's not the best image. I would like to reinforce that with any candidate, we're looking at the big picture. So if somebody has a little glitch in one thing, it's not like, oh, the person's off the list. So we definitely understand how challenging it is to deal with all the aspects of this application process. So we're sensitive to that. But again, that's one thing that's probably not the best image for somebody.
Thank you for checking out this episode of Going All In, Get the Edge You Need to Succeed. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode of this amazing podcast. We'll see you next time.